Let's go ahead and skip over to the call book, and we'll pull up a couple different cases that we can look at. Let me share screen with you. This guy right here. Boom. All right, so a couple different things that are maybe not necessarily strictly dealing with slowing your boat down, but are looking at some of these two boats coming close together, and we're probably in a situation where one of them is trying to go slow anyway. So we look at this first one. This is looking at a couple different rules. Remember, we said we can search by rule. If you remember how the table of contents works, A was kind of the general definitions and stuff. B was the pre-start. I think C was starting or something, and D is upwind, and so it keeps going through. But this one call we're looking at is while tacking and changing course, right? So while tacking, we've already mentioned. I think it is one thing that is worth noting as I was kind of looking through this stuff is that when we're talking about when we're kind of walking ourselves through these rules during practices and chalk talks, I think we often, and I'm guilty of this as well, we often use the phrase, "this boat has no rights," or something like that, when the actual wording is, "this boat shall keep clear of other boats." And it's on the surface, it doesn't seem like a big distinction, but it actually is. If we walk through this case, this call, we'll see why. So again, we've got these letters and numbers. Y is always this, or typically is this white boat. B is this blue boat. I guess it makes sense if you think about blue and yellow, right? This is all black and white pictures, but if they were in color, could easily imagine they're blue and yellow, just saying they're not red and green, so don't confuse, because those are the traditional colors for port and starboard. But so at position 1, here's this guy on starboard. Here's this guy also on starboard. The blue boat is obviously going for attack. If we can see at position 2, it looks like he is just head to wind, exactly head to wind. And right here, here's the yellow boat in that same point in time. At position 3, what is it? This guy, he's just past head to wind. So now, according to the rules, he has started tacking. He must keep clear of a boat that is not tacking, which includes this yellow boat coming towards him at position 3. And then still at position 4, it looks like he's not come down to a close haul course, so he is still tacking. But if we look at what the yellow boat has done, is they altered their course. They kept turning down. And in the situation here, it says the yellow boat continues to bear away, and they go behind the blue boat, and then they protest, which I would assume that something along the lines of, "You were tacking, you should have avoided me." Turns out, and I have pulled up the answer because I scrolled down far enough, but there was no contact, and so it turns out that there is no penalty, because what the situation was is that the blue boat was keeping clear of the yellow boat. If we look at the original situation, this guy was going this way. His track would have gone somewhere like that. When this blue boat decided to tack, his track after his tack would have been somewhere like this. And so they would have gone their separate ways and been no issue. But once the blue boat started tacking, he started losing speed, because you don't have speed through your tack. So it's going to obviously take you longer to avoid somebody if there becomes a need to do so. So the right-of-way boat, that is your one big need as the right-of-way boat, is you are required to give the give-way boat, the keep clear boat, you're required to give them room to avoid you. And so a boat that is tacking will necessarily require a longer time to avoid, right? The obvious, the caveat that comes up, I forget where exactly it is in the rules, but it says you don't need to worry about that if the situation occurs because of the keep clear boat's actions, right? So if this yellow boat were somewhere down here and he's going in a straight line, and the blue boat starts tacking, and then right here is where they have an issue, and yellow protests, that would be the blue boat's fault, because he was putting himself into a situation where he could not keep clear of the yellow boat. The yellow boat didn't do anything. In this particular case that we're walking through, the yellow boat is the one who changed his course to cause a collision course. And so it wasn't the blue boat's fault that, he didn't anticipate that happening, and so wasn't able to get out of the way. So hopefully that makes sense, that distinction there. So when we say sometimes that this boat has no rights, we actually shouldn't say that, because they still do have the right to not have this happen to them, right? They have the right to be protected from somebody purposefully hunting them, if that's the right word. So yeah, just wanted to make sure that that distinction is there. They've got that second question here we may as well look at. Will that answer that we walked through, will it change if the blue boat intentionally puts himself in a situation where it would be impossible to keep clear? So imagine this guy just went up into head to wind and stayed in irons, would that change the answer? And it looks like I did actually scroll down a little too far, so we can read that, but no, turns out that would not change how this rule works, right? So we are not the boat that is the keep clear boat in a situation is not required to anticipate the next actions of the right-of-way boat. So that'll follow through, to any rule application that we use. You only have to react to something that's already occurred. So like when we're talking about windward leeward, maybe the easiest example there is, on the start line, somebody comes along underneath, and this blue boat is sitting here, and the yellow boat is coming in, and they're saying, I'm going to be the leeward boat, you need to start heading up. But the blue boat does not need to start heading up until the moment when that overlap is established. Now the blue boat needs to react and head up to keep clear. But just no matter how you see the situation developing, there's no need to take avoiding action until something already happens. Which also means, on the other end of it, that you can't be the right-of-way boat and claim that your warning the other guy about what you were about to do was the other guy's time to avoid, right? It's only when something actually happens. So it doesn't matter what you say is going to happen or what you think or what the other boat thinks is going to happen. It just matters what does happen. So yeah, maybe two important points there. Those two things we just went through. All right, what else did I have? A couple other things to look through. Let's go down and find D4 right down here. All right, so this is one where we're trying to deal with two boats here. One of them is tacking, and this is a situation that we're probably never going to see in fleet racing. It's one that I don't think I've ever seen personally in team racing, but certainly is just going to be the sort of thing when we are in this situation where we're not worried about losing to 12 other boats if we try this. So looks like we've got a yellow and a blue again. So blue is ahead of yellow. Blue crosses yellow on starboard tack, and then blue tacks. But while they are tacking, the yellow boat is luffing up into the wind. So see they're above close hauled, so they're going a lot slower than they were before, but they still are at an angle where they are getting some power from their sail, right? So, mostly coasting along, but still moving ahead a little bit. And it says heels to windward. So that's something we can maybe talk about some other day. But it's a way of allowing you to point a bit higher into the wind and still have power in your sails. But anyway, the point being, he's sailing a lot higher than he otherwise would if he were going on close haul. So then B, the blue boat here is completed. Looks like he's down to the angle where he's completed his tack, and then he's starting to move. But now the yellow boat has been coasting up above close hauled for so long that as the blue boat comes down, starts to continue his path, there's contact there. So B is protesting, I assume, for something along the lines of I don't know, prop the course. I don't know exactly what his call would have been, but blue looks like he's the one who protests. But turns out it doesn't matter who protests as long as the umpire sees the situation correctly. So in this position, it says right here when we start to tack, right? So he's just at this particular moment, he hasn't yet, but as soon as we leave this 2 moment behind and go to like 2.1 or whatever, then he has crossed head to win. He started tacking. So he is the one that gave up his right away position of starboard tack boat and put himself into a first tacking and then windward boat position. So that means the rule 15, which is that the right away boat has to give room to avoid. This rule does not apply because it's the boat that's becoming the keep clear boat that caused the situation, just like we talked about a little above, right? So in that case, then the yellow boat doesn't have to worry about what he's doing, as long as we see in this diagram, he continues what he was doing at that moment, right? So he didn't head higher up into the wind after the guy started tacking. He kept going straight along his course. So that's probably the biggest thing to remember about this type of situation. Even if somebody is putting themselves in a keep clear position, it doesn't give you the ability to change your course suddenly, because once you change your course, now the onus is back on you to give room to avoid. So at any rate, when we don't have to go into proper course a whole lot right now, but proper course does not apply here for the people that already know about that. So they, as we said, they didn't alter course. So rule 16, which is the changing your course, that doesn't apply. So in this case, it just means that the blue boat we're only looking at the tacking rule, and so he's broken rule 13, right? Now, interesting to look. We basically kind of went through that all as I was just talking there. But if the yellow boat were to luff after B had passed head to wind and then there was contact, would the answer be the same? So we're saying if the yellow boat right here is when they started heading up rather than right here, how would that change? And yeah, there are different possibilities, right? So she has to make sure that she is giving room to avoid when she changes course. So for a 10-second explanation of 15 versus 16, rule 15 is when you get right of way. Like if I tack onto starboard from port, I'm now getting a right of way I didn't have. Rule 16 is if I have right of way and change it. So if I was already on starboard, but then I change my course. That's the difference between those. They're still both saying you have to give room to avoid when you do something. But so yellow boat has to make sure that's happening. But if they don't have room to keep clear, even if even if B looks like they're saying even if she came partway through and then realized yellow was there and then tacked back and still ended up hitting the yellow boat because the yellow boat got so close, then that would actually be the yellow boat's fault. So again, not a situation that we'll see a lot, but the ramifications behind it are important to understand, I think. So sorry for anybody who doesn't have all those rules. They came fast and thick there, 13, 15, 16, 17. But they all are decently similar. The concepts behind them are pretty similar, which is why they all did kind of pop up at once. All right, so there's that guy. Then what do we have? I think this next one I was also looking at, it was decently similar, except we're coming from a position where maybe this is kind of a lockup situation where the blue boat is trying to prevent the yellow boat from tacking, right? So in question 1, we'll look at, so again, we've got yellow here and blue here. Yellow's trying to tack, so they head up into the wind to luff a little bit to let blue, head up, head past them so that they can tack behind blue's stern. But blue sees this happening. They head up as well. And then as the yellow boat goes to tack, looks like there is contact there, right? So just looking at the situation, we see the blue boat has not passed head to wind. They have not started tacking by the rules. The yellow boat has passed head to wind. They have started tacking by the rules. So if we look at this, and it looks like I have been able to successfully not show the answer, Does anybody have a guess as to what this answer would be? And I think while I'm sharing my screen, I can't see hand raises. So just if you think you know something, go ahead and shout it out. Or if nobody has a guess, that's okay. But if we scroll down and let's find out what they're actually saying. So remember, it's only when something happens that the keep clear boat has to react. So knowing that when blue sees the yellow boat start heading up, they know that very likely they're going to try to tack. But until they try to tack, that hasn't happened yet. So they don't have to think about that situation. And in this particular case, we did say just from the phrasing of the question that proper course did apply. So the yellow boat was not able to sail above her proper course, which in this case, unless the mark was way over off to the right, her proper course is, still kind of to sail close hauled. She wouldn't be sailing above close hauled normally, right? So she can only sail above her proper course if she sails behind boat B, which she looked like she was about to do. So that much she didn't look like she was trying to break that rule. But as soon as she passes head to wind, then the blue boat becomes the one that's left as the right of way, right? Because they stayed on starboard. The yellow boat is now tacking. So if the blue boat were to have suddenly changed their course, if the reason that this contact happened is because the blue boat suddenly headed up, which kicked their stern down towards the yellow boat, then that would be the blue boat's fault, because again, we have to give room to avoid, and a sudden motion like that, especially when the other boat is tacking and can't move as quickly, that's going to not leave that room to avoid. But if the blue boat was continuing straight and the yellow boat just misjudged things and didn't quite clear them, that would definitely be the yellow boat's fault. And I think looking at the second question, it's going to be fairly similar, right? So if we scroll down, will the answer be different if the contact occurs before Y reaches head to wind? So in that case, that's where we would see that rule 17, that proper course, come in. So if the proper course is saying if a boat caught up to somebody else, they got an overlap by catching them from behind. It's a very simplified way of saying it. It doesn't get everything in, but it's enough for right here. If we'll just say rule 17 is applying and they cannot head above close hauled unless they pass behind them. So if they head up and hit this guy before they even start attacking, then that's just on them for rule 17. So people that don't understand rule 17, just forget that question for now. We'll cover proper course some other day. It is a little bit more complicated, so don't worry if that one didn't make sense to you yet. But certainly this one, question 1, is a good one we can see there. All right, I had just a couple more before we go. Let's see. Do I want to go through this guy? Yeah, let's do that one. D7. Whoops. There we go. I could have probably just scrolled down. I was pretty close to it anyway. So again, looking at rule 11, which is the windward leeward, or the phrasing on the same tack and overlapped. Then we got that 16.1 again, that changing course, given room to avoid. We got 17 again, proper course. So again, we'll try to downplay the part of that that's in there if we're able to. Or for the people that already know 17, you'll be able to get this full question. But again, I've scrolled down a little too far, so we already see the answer. We'll just look at everything. So we've got the blue boat is holding the yellow boat out past the ley line. So I think we mentioned that back on the whiteboard. But what this blue boat is doing is making sure that the yellow boat cannot round the mark before him, right? And so this guy looks like we're on a slightly different course. Most of team racing is on those digital ends, but occasionally it's not. So in this particular case, they are going around starboard. We could just kind of take this as a mirror image if we wanted to. So yellow boat is trying to force the blue boat probably to tack, so they're starting to luff up a bit. But then the blue boat keeps going, so the yellow boat, in order to not hit them as they luff up, it has to bear away again. And so they protest. Obviously, this protest would have just been windward lured. I headed up. I was lured. You were windward. You didn't move. So that should be on you. And they see what the umpires say. And in this situation, then yes, it is just a decently simple windward lured. They gave room to keep clear because there was no collision, right? So even if there had been a collision, there would still be a possibility that the yellow boat had given room to keep clear. But certainly when there was no collision, then obviously there was plenty of room to keep clear because one or the other of the boats did so. So 16.1, the yellow boat has no issue with that. So it's really just that rule 11, right? And in this case, what we're saying, if the yellow boat is subject to rule 17, but their proper course is to go this way, right? They're trying to get over here. So the proper course would not hurt them. Unless I'm misunderstanding that as we look through question 2. So 17 is, like I said, it's a bit complicated. Even I can get it wrong sometimes. So they're saying if it's not obvious to us whether we're overstanding the mark, right? So, okay, yep. So no, I did call that. Sorry for the confusion there. I did call what I just said about rule 17 is still the case in that original scenario. The yellow boat's proper course is to be heading for that mark. So their proper course is to try to be tacking there, right? If it is not obvious yet that our proper course is over there, it's not obvious that we've gone way past the ley line. Right here, that's obvious to see, but maybe this is a position where we're closer back here when this whole situation is going on. When position 3 is reached, maybe we're sitting here, and it might still be the case that we should be going this way. So we can't say for sure that I definitely need to be tacking to get over there, right? So in that case, then we could say that, yeah, you're going above your proper course, and you haven't gone. You can only do that if you go behind the blue boat, right? But this is another interesting point to bring up, is that when that is happening, we need to make sure that both boats are responding to the situation correctly. It's kind of like when we talked about the room to tack rule before. If a boat hails for room to tack, they might be doing it correctly according to the rules, or they might be calling for it when they don't really need it. But in either case, you're still required to give them the room to tack. And then if you think that they called it incorrectly, or you think they called it for an invalid reason, then you protest. But you can't just ignore it, because then you're wrong too. So same deal here. If we're in a situation where we don't know that this yellow boat does have the right to make us tack, then we would still have to keep clear, right? We're still the windward boat. So we would head up and we would avoid them, and then, do whatever we need to do. Maybe that's the best time for us to tack, whatever the situation is. But we're going to avoid them. We can protest them later for breaking rule 17, proper course. But we do still have the responsibility to avoid as the giveaway boat, right? If we think that we shouldn't have had to avoid, we will protest, but we can't just not avoid, because then we're in the wrong too. As we saw here in this question, both, the yellow boat did break rule 17, but now the blue boat has broken rule 11. All right, I think, did I have one more, or yeah, let's go through one more. So looking at this one, looks back at actually the normal team race course, the digital end. So we're at a windward mark that is rounding to starboard. So this is our mark 1 in our team race, team race listing, name list, whatever the phrase would be there. But so here's our situation. We've got blue boat, yellow boat coming in. and they're overlapped as they come into the zone. So remember talking about mark room, it's as soon as either boat is in the zone. So right at this position, now we take our snapshot and we say the blue boat definitely has the inside overlap, right? Whether or not that becomes relevant later. But at any rate, we are this is where we take our picture, which is, that's why they have this right here instead of right behind the blue. So it's not the first instant that both boats are inside the circle. It's the first instant that either boat hits the circle, right? So that's what's going on there. Then we continue on. Here's position 2, position 3. Both boats have come up and they're kind of head to wind as they come in here and tack around the mark. And then position 4, as blue turns down to go around the mark, and yellow is still not quite able to do that because of blue. But when this happens, the blue boat actually hits the yellow boat. So who's in the wrong, who's in the right? Turns out, since we're going around, we're looking at the mark room here. We're going to say that the blue boat he wasn't given enough mark room, because part of mark room is being able to tack around the mark if you need to, right? Maneuver room to round the mark as necessary to sail the course. So in this situation, rounding the mark as necessary includes a tack. And so we need to anticipate that when a boat tacks, its bow swings this way, but also its stern swings out away from the mark, right? So we need to give that little bit of extra room and make sure that this doesn't happen. So there's that. Make sure that, and all these, all the fancy rule numbers, this 18.2b is basically just what I paraphrased. 21a is just a rule that says, if there is, contact and if there's a foul that was caused by somebody else fouling you, you don't have to take the penalty for that foul. That's that rule. Rule 13, remember, is while tacking. If this mark were not here, then this would be the blue boat's fault, right? Because this guy is still head to wind. He hasn't started tacking. This boat is tacking according to the rules. And he's the one who put himself in this situation. So the yellow boat is not required to give room to keep clear as long as he doesn't change his course. So without this mark being here, this is the blue boat's fault. But because we've introduced the mark room situation, this guy, the blue boat, is entitled to room to round the mark and in a normal manner of sailing. That's not the official terminology, but he's allowed to make his tack here because he needs to tack to go around. And because he wasn't given that full room, it actually becomes yellow's fault. So just make sure that we are keeping that in mind. And now looking at question 2, we've got a slightly different situation going on here. So again, looking at where we are when this first boat reaches the zone, the 2-boat length zone around the mark. For team racing, it would be 3 if it was fleet racing. So that circle would be kind of out here, and who knows, maybe we had a different situation then. But for team racing, 2-boat lengths, so there is overlap by just a little bit. But if we kind of look at these boats, it makes sense that since the yellow boat is sailing in the blue boat's bad air, that he would kind of fall back a bit as we get up here. So in theory, this blue boat is still entitled to mark room, right? By any standard, really, in this particular situation. First, he was inside. But then even if there had been no overlap and we're just right here, if this is where we were at the zone, then he's clear ahead, right? But we get in an interesting situation where the yellow boat is still close enough that as this blue boat starts to try to tack, the yellow boat is still right here. They kind of luff up and they're saying, hey, let's scroll down and make sure we read the situation correctly. They're saying, hey, don't tack because you're gonna run into me. So what is the difference here? Let's go ahead and read through that. I will be honest, I read through it earlier, but I would not have been able to just look at those 2 scenarios and tell you what was the difference between them. So what's going on here is, like we said, the yellow boat is the outside boat. They have to give them mark room. B still gets mark room. Her course would be the tack. She's not overlapped to windward of yellow. So here is where I had to stop, and I had to go back to the definitions page in the beginning of the racing rules. Because again, here's another thing where we often just say kind of the paraphrase and we don't actually see the whole thing. And it turns out, I bet that we've all spent a good amount of time reading through Rule 18, but maybe not actually looking at the definition of markroom. So if we pull that up, it's room for a boat to leave a mark on the required side. Also, room to sail to the mark when her proper course is to sail close to it, and room to round the mark as necessary to sail the course. The part that this second scenario comes into and is explaining, however, mark room for a boat does not include room to tack unless she is overlapped on the inside and to windward of the boat required to give mark room, and she would be fetching the mark after her tack. So fetching is just you can sail to it on close hauled. So in this situation, this last phrase doesn't matter to us because we're right at the mark. But if we were, maybe tacking at the edge of the circle and then sailing in, that's something that would come into play. So we can ignore that last phrase, but it's this first part of the sentence right here that I've highlighted. That is some weird shaped highlighting. But anyway, so if we look at that, we go back to our image here and we realize that's the difference. So in this case, when we're talking about these two boats are overlapped, and the inside boat obviously gets mark room. But in this case, the boats coming into the zone here are no longer overlapped. So the blue boat is still entitled to mark room under the rule. However, there's not overlap. So we look back at that rule again. Whoops, let me click without hitting my zoom button. There we go. Mark room for a boat does not include room to tack unless she's overlapped inside and to windward. So she is to windward, but she's not overlapped inside. There's no overlap anymore. That means that this yellow boat is perfectly within their rights they've allowed the blue boat to get to the mark. They've fulfilled the obligations of mark room, but there is no longer any necessity to allow them also to tack as there was in this situation. So this was another one where I actually learned something today as I was looking through here and thought that was definitely worthwhile to share with y'all. So again, the call book for team racing, the racing rules of sailing, the case book as well for fleet racing, very good stuff to read through and just see these situations that I wouldn't have thought I didn't have a full understanding of. But I would have before given you the same answer to question 1 for question 2, but learned there's a little more to that definition of mark room than I understood.